job is to be present.
The human cost is right here.
And to tell these stories.
We're talking about families.
That is the most important thing. I'm Clarissa Ward in Ukraine. This is CNN.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Abortion is healthcare! Abortion is healthcare!
Tonight, America now reckoning with life after Roe.
This court has lost legitimacy.
The heated debate over the fallout from the left.
This decision and this policy will kill people.
And the right.
Friday was a glorious day. This is a huge victory for the pro-life movement.
Meantime, world leaders resolving to punish Putin for his war on Ukraine.
If we let Putin get away with it, the consequences for the world are absolutely catastrophic.
Tightening the sanctions squeeze with a new ban on Russian gold.
They're already having a dramatic effect.
And Capitol riot investigators building a blueprint for the Justice Department to charge Trump.
If you follow the evidence where it leads, then you have a duty to prosecute.
2 members of the January 6th committee tell us what's next. I'm Pamela Brown in Washington. You are live in the CNN newsroom. Roe reversal and the ripple effect. We are seeing another day of demonstrations across the country after Friday's Supreme Court decision to overturn abortion rights. That was in Greenville, South Carolina. Scuffles broke out as police tried to separate protesters with opposing points of view. And meantime, the pushback, a coalition of 83 prosecutors nationwide representing 87 million people, publicly vowing not to prosecute people seeking or performing abortions. And then there is a blunt memo from Homeland Security tonight. The department warning that violent extremism is, quote, likely, especially in states rushing to roll back abortion rights. CNN has reporters on the ground covering all the latest developments. Let's begin with Sunlen Serfati. She is right outside the Supreme Court, or actually she is walking now. What's going on there? What's the mood like, Sunlen?
Yeah, Pam, this demonstration is certainly on the move and it is certainly loud. This is a group of protesters that are in opposition to Friday's historic Supreme Court ruling, and they want to see abortion rights in this country restored again. They were at the Supreme Court for hours and hours protesting earlier today, but they have decided to take this demonstration on the move. They have marched by the Supreme Court, then by Congress, Capitol Hill, along the iconic Independence Avenue, and they are now making their way towards the mile-long walk towards the White House. The organizers say they need to let President Biden know that they are angry with this decision. Again, a lot of these people here came from many states away to protest. We talked to many women who are here with their young daughters saying that this is historic and important that they understand what's going on in our country. A lot of passions, though, from both sides of this issue, Pam. But again, this is just one group, a large group, a couple hundred people here, closing down a major road in Washington, D.C., Independence Avenue, marching from the Supreme Court to the White House.
And I'm Camila Bernal in Los Angeles. We are also on the move. This is the third day of protest here in the downtown Los Angeles area. This group of protesters, they heard from a number of speakers just before they started marching. We heard from people who've had an abortion who said and wanted to share their stories. One of them even saying that she'd had an abortion and that she was thankful for it and owed a lot of her successes to that abortion. This is a passionate crowd, and a lot of these organizers saying they need to meet each other because these are the people that will be fighting with them for the next couple of months. Organizers here telling the crowd to focus on abortion funds because they say that the money and the volunteer work will be needed as California prepares for an influx of women coming to this state from other states where abortions will not be permitted. And so this is a group that stands with the women in other states saying that they are here for them and that they will continue this fight for them. They say there's a lot of work to be done here in California, but they say that work begins right here on the streets.
I'm Polo Sandoval, New York City, where once again the crowds are back to celebrate New York City Pride. This year, however, another element of protest is Planned Parenthood was invited to lead the way during this year's parade. A major symbolic move here meant to echo the frustration and the anger that we have seen in New York City in light of the Supreme Court ruling on Friday. Heavy on the mind of not just spectators but also participants was Justice Clarence Thomas's separate opinion, in which he writes that the court should perhaps revisit rulings including not just contraception but also gay marriage. There are many people here today that told me that they feel that that is where their next focus should be in terms of their fight, as today, though, is focused on celebrating but at the same time protesting the ruling from Friday.
All right, thanks so much, Polo, Sunland, Camila. We appreciate it. And with emotions running high, our reporters are experiencing intense moments as they cover the story. CNN's Nadia Romero takes a closer look.
Abortion bans are illegitimate. Forced motherhood is illegitimate.
From Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles and in between, abortion rights protesters continue to voice their anguish following the ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court to eliminate the federal constitutional right to an abortion.
I'm angry. I'm fired up. The fight is not over. People did this fight 50 years ago. I guess it's our turn to take the fight up again. It may take us 50 years, but we'll get back.
Smaller gatherings of people celebrating the ruling are also taking place.
Millions of lives will be saved by this decision.
In Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a pedestrian was injured by a truck while trying to legally cross the street in front of the federal courthouse during Friday evening's protests in the city, according to Cedar Rapids police.
I look over, I see people trying to push the truck back, and I just instantly got mad and ran over, tried to stop the truck.
Video of the incident shows a truck appearing to push through a group of protesters, with one person falling to the ground after making contact with the vehicle. In Providence, Rhode Island, state Democratic Senate candidate Jennifer Rourke was punched in the face by an off-duty police officer and GOP opponent at an abortion rights rally at the State House on Friday night. Rourke told CNN in a statement. The incident, which was caught on video, shows what appears to be Rourke stepping into an altercation at the protest and almost immediately afterwards getting punched in the face by Gene Lugo. Lugo turned himself in to the Rhode Island State Police on Saturday. Eric Yanyar, lieutenant for the Rhode Island State Police, told CNN. CNN reached out to the Providence Fraternal Order of Police to inquire about the possible legal representation for Lugo, but did not hear back Saturday night. In Phoenix, law enforcement used tear gas late Friday to disperse a crowd of abortion rights supporters after they repeatedly pounded on the glass doors of the state Senate building. Arizona Department of Public Safety spokesperson Bart Graves told CNN. In Eugene, Oregon, 10 people were arrested on Friday night during a demonstration dubbed a Night of Rage in response to the ruling, according to a release from Eugene police. Greenville, South Carolina. At least 6 people were arrested Saturday at a protest that was attended by hundreds of people in downtown, according to a news release by the Greenville Police Department. Video taken by Emily Porter shows the moment police detained several demonstrators in downtown Greenville at the rally. A video shared with CNN shows police detaining several people and forcing a man to the ground. An officer is also seen yelling at protesters to get back. Although another officer tells protesters who are jeering the police, "We are not on either side." In Washington, D.C., U.S. Capitol Police arrested 2 people on Saturday afternoon for the destruction of property after they were accused of, quote, throwing paint over the fence by the U.S. Supreme Court, USCP tweeted. Large protests have also been held in Philadelphia and Los Angeles, and in New York City, many demonstrators gathered in Washington Square Park to protest the ruling, even though New York state law will remain in place to protect abortion rights.
And back here in Mississippi, the state's first female attorney general, Lynn Fitch, has already tweeted out her support for the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Now, she must certify this into law, and that takes about 10 days or so. So in that time period, the state's last abortion clinic here in Jackson, Mississippi, says it will keep its doors open and it will continue to provide abortions to women who need it. And they say they do expect anti-abortion protesters to be outside their clinic throughout that time as well. Pamela?
All right, Nadia, thank you so much. And joining us now, CNN Supreme Court reporter Ariane DeVogue. So Ariane, look, we all knew a ruling on Roe v. Wade was coming this month. We didn't know when, came Friday, but there are still cases that we're waiting on before this controversial term ends at the High Court.
Right, the term isn't over.
Yeah.
There are important cases. One has to do with religious liberty. It's that high school football coach. He wanted to pray at the 50-yard line. He got suspended. The school basically said, look, if we allow this, it'll look like we're endorsing religion here. So if the court rules in his favor, it's going to allow more religious speech in the public sphere. There's also an important immigration case that we're following, and that has to do with Biden trying to get rid of a Trump-era policy that basically pushed back migrants who were trying to come in to do their proceedings and pushed them back to Mexico. The lower courts have blocked Biden from being able to do this. So he's coming to the Supreme Court and saying, look, this is my ability to do policy, plus this has important foreign policy implications. So he wants the Supreme Court to rule in his favor. And then there's a big environmental case, right? And it has to do with the EPA's authority, right, to regulate emissions from certain power plants. And this case comes as the Biden administration and some scientists are looking so carefully trying to cut back on global warming. So these cases and a few others still will come this week. It's not over yet.
Yeah, the Kennedy and versus Bremerton one is super interesting. I wrote a paper on that in law school, and I think it will come down to ultimately, in listening to the oral arguments, whether he was off duty when he prayed at the midfield. These other cases really interesting as well. Ariane, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And coming up this hour, hundreds of people injured as part of a stadium in Colombia collapses. Also ahead, did the January 6th committee just hit a home run with the damning testimony from Donald Trump's former allies? Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren has a front row seat. She's going to join us. I'm going to ask her about that. Coming up, you're in the CNN Newsroom.
コーヒーの持つ力って人と人をつなぐ力だと思ってて、うちの会社のビジョンっていうのは日本のコーヒーといえばフィロコフィアってなることなんですよ。からそれを達成するには世界に向けた通販が必要だったんですよね。
Across Africa, businesses are working together like never before. All new on CNN, Connecting Africa.
Join me, Eleni Jokos, as we crisscross the continent to show you how new connections are revolutionizing commerce in Africa. This month, Connecting Africa from the Africa CEO Forum here in Côte d'Ivoire.
This forum really brings Africans together.
Connecting Africa on CNN, in association with Afreximbank.
Today, we live in an unpredictable environment, and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
The missile struck right here. What is your interpretation of Putin's intention?
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers.
What does President Putin think he has achieved in Ukraine to date?
We just want to say stop to Vladimir Putin.
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
What are you looking at for the future with these additional formations that you've talked about, and where? What are the UN and other countries doing for you? Is it enough?
It's crucial we make sense of what's happening.
We are doing this for our very survival.
What do you think a peace or a ceasefire or an end to this looks like?
And fully understand what's at stake.
We have will, we have guts, and we are fighting like hell.
Amanpour, tonight on CNN.
this whale shark. Nature is on the move, but natural paths are under threat. Now meet incredible conservationists, helping species cross highways, span flyways, and get from A to B.
This is nature's highway, and we must protect it.
Call to Earth, protecting nature's highways.
Saturday on CNN.
Layer by layer, witness by witness, the January 6th committee has used its first 5 public hearings to drive home a truly unsettling reality check that this nation came dangerously close to a coup. Last week, state elections officials testified how then President Trump and his allies pressured them to decertify Joe Biden's legitimate election win. And on Thursday, top officials from the Trump Justice Department described how they defied his increasingly manic pressure to act on his baseless claims of voter fraud. This morning, one committee member laid out the stakes.
This is bigger than Donald Trump. This is bigger than one individual. How do we protect democracy and make sure that we stand up for the rule of law? And clearly there were individuals who did their job that day and leading up to January 6th. Brad Raffensperger and other elected officials who truly did their job. But in the future, there will be an option or there is a possibility that people may not do their job. And I think that's the problem that we face.
Joining me now is another member of the January 6th Select Committee, Democratic Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren of California. Hi, Congresswoman. Good to see you. So, been watching the hearings. The committee's hearings have produced important pieces of new information from witnesses at the highest levels of the Trump administration. I'm wondering, do you think the Justice Department is being as aggressive in its investigation as the committee?
Well, you know, there's no way for us to know. The Justice Department is not reporting into us, and by the way, they shouldn't be reporting into us.
But they are sending letters to you saying, demanding that you turn over transcripts and so forth.
Well, we were very surprised by that. I mean, obviously, we're a legislative branch committee, and they are, you know, an executive branch agency, the prosecutors. And, you know, we're certainly not an arm of the Justice Department. However, we're not going to stand in the way of their prosecution, and we will share in an appropriate way our information.
It sounds like we might have another visitor on the show there in the background. So this past week, the 3 top Justice Department officials testified in detail that Trump was relentlessly attempting a coup. These were the top, some of the top Trump White House officials, right? Or administration officials, Republicans. Right. Why does the committee still need to hear publicly from White House counsel Pat Cipollone? And what is the latest with the committee's invitation for him to testify publicly?
We would very much like to hear from Mr. Cipollone, and we have asked him, and we have not given up on hearing from him. We think he has an obligation to come in and tell the committee what he knows, and we're hoping that he will still do that. You know, we don't have that agreement yet. Let's just put it that way.
Right. And as you know, he has said he has been cooperating with the committee, and he just doesn't want to testify publicly. That's what we're being told by sources. So I'm wondering, will the committee subpoena him? Is that under discussion?
Well, you know, we have, as we said in one of our hearings, we had an informal interview with him, and in fact, we did quote from the notes at one of the informal hearings. Whether or not we'd subpoena him, I can't say. As you know, these subpoena requests sometimes end up in endless litigation, and we are pursuing this very diligently, but we don't have time to spend a year in court. So I don't know the answer, but let me just say this. He should come forward and tell the truth. I think that would be important. We've learned a lot about what he did and said from others. But there are some things we'd like to discuss with him directly.
Like what?
Well, I'm not going to get into that interview right now, but I will say I'm sure he's aware of what we would like to ask him, as are we.
And in terms of the subpoena, I'm sure that the fact that DOJ declined to prosecute Meadows and Scavino for defying the committee subpoena, that would factor into the decision making on that front. And we also know that there were one-on-one conversations between then President Trump and his Vice President Mike Pence. Considering what we have learned, is there still a chance that the committee might call Mike Pence?
Well, I wouldn't rule it out. On the other hand, we have heard and learned an enormous amount about what the vice president did and said and heard from others around him. So really, we've learned an enormous amount from his people.
But you wouldn't rule it out. Okay, so I got to ask another one. Where do things stand with Ginni Thomas, wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas? Have you heard back from her? Is she willing to come to testify behind closed doors about her connection to these efforts to overturn the election?
Well, as you know, we sent her a letter asking her to come in. It was sent privately. She made a decision to share it publicly, which she had every right to do. And she did say to the media that she was looking forward to coming in and talking to the committee, and we take her at her word that she will be coming in to talk to us.
Well, have you heard back from her though, or are you just referring to?
I don't know where. I don't know where that is. Obviously, that is negotiated, the time and place between her lawyers and our staff, and I don't know the precise status of that. But since she said publicly she was eager to come in, I expect that that's the truth. Why would she lie and say that if she didn't mean it?
Your committee has weaved in new information with what the public already knew, painting this big picture. New headlines have emerged from every hearing. How much new information or testimony will we see in the upcoming hearings? Can you give us any insight on what to expect?
Well, there will be new things. We've got new information coming in, by the way, and so we need to evaluate, really a very large amount of new information and see how much of it is relevant and how much isn't. But we also have new information that had already been uncovered that we plan to unveil as the story unfolds for the public. So, I think the basic outlines of what happened have always been known, but every hearing we've been able to provide additional insight and details that I think have helped fill out the picture for people.
All right, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday.
Anytime.
And you were in the CNN newsroom. Still ahead tonight, we are live in Europe where President Biden is meeting with G7 allies. Here are the warning from the British Prime Minister on what he thinks is at stake if Putin wins his war in Ukraine.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
We think of the metaverse as the next iteration of social media. And although there's only a few 100,000 people using it today, we anticipate that over the next few years, there's going to be millions of people joining these platforms and eventually billions of people using these platforms. This is not a fad. I mean, we can look at companies like Facebook doing the largest rebrand in history to Meta. We can look at companies like Samsung. Even the fashion brands like Gucci, Balenciaga, Adidas, and Nike are all establishing a presence there. And so what I would say to people that are still skeptical, say this is, maybe are the same type of people that were skeptical about social media and its impact on advertising, and maybe even people who are skeptical about the internet. My prediction is that within 24 months, every single large corporation is going to have to need a presence in the metaverse in the same way that they need a website.
Advancement, adaptation, new Marketplace Middle East.
Find out why water is the new blue gold.
Marketplace Middle East, Saturday on CNN.
When you travel the world, make sure the world travels with you. Check in, log on, and get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels. Connected to your world.
Our mission here at CNN and journalists, the news comes first. That's when your heart beats a little bit faster. More breaking news that we are following right now. You really work as hard as you can, getting the facts. We're learning more about our life plot. It is critically important. To our viewers in the United States and around the world, welcome to the Situation Room. We have breaking news.
I'm Nick Watt in Los Angeles, and this is CNN.
As President Biden and G7 leaders were gathering in Germany, Russian missiles pounded the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. An apartment complex was hit, and the mayor says one person was killed and that a 7-year-old girl was among the injured. As Russia steps up its attacks, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson told CNN's Jake Tapper that Putin must be stopped.
And if we let Putin get away with it and just annex, conquer sizable parts of a free, independent, sovereign country, which is what he is poised to do, if not the whole thing, then the consequences for the world are absolutely catastrophic.
Following this story is CNN's MJ Lee. She is at the summit. So MJ, what are G7 leaders proposing to do about Putin?
Well, Pam, of course, a top priority for the G7 leaders is to continue putting the pressure on Vladimir Putin and try to figure out ways to make him continue paying a price for Russia's continued aggression in Ukraine. It is why we saw the G7 leaders announcing today a new import ban on new gold from Russia, given that it is a huge export item for Russia. They want it to be another way in which the country feels a squeeze economically. Now, I will note that Russia has not been the only focus of the G7 summit so far. Another initiative has been trying to counter China as it is growing its influence economically. So what we saw was the announcement of a number of global infrastructure initiatives aimed at developing countries, things like vaccine programs, dealing with climate change and investing in clean energy initiatives. Obviously, that last one is so critical given that we have seen prices go up for energy. That has led to consumers having to pay more for gas prices. We heard President Biden talking a little bit about this issue specifically. Take a listen.
The entire world is feeling the impact of Russia's brutal war in Ukraine and on our energy markets. We need worldwide effort to invest in transformative clean energy projects to ensure that critical infrastructure is resilient to changing climate.
Now, as you know, Pam, President Biden left for his trip to Europe after such a consequential week at home. And earlier today, reporters that were with President Biden asked him whether the news of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, whether that came up at all in his meetings with G7 leaders. He said directly that that did not come up at all, that that was not related to the discussions that they were having about Ukraine. So the president, of course, has been thinking very much about this very big news back at home, but trying to make clear that for the time being at the G7, Ukraine is really a major focus. Pam.
All right, MJ Lee, thank you so much. Well, a deadly mystery is under investigation in South Africa. The bodies of 22 people were found in a tavern, and the person leading the autopsy says none of the victims died of natural causes. CNN's Larry Madowo is following the story for us.
Pam, there is outrage and heartbreak in South Africa tonight, and a whole lot of questions about how a tragedy like this happened in the coastal town of East London in South Africa. Children as young as 13, the ages ranged between 13 and 17 according to provincial authorities, dead in a tavern, the bodies strewn on chairs and tables and on floors in a tavern where it's exactly not clear how they got there. The legal drinking age in South Africa is 18. And South Africa's Police Minister Bheki Cele, who went to the scene and later to the morgue, was reduced to tears after seeing the bodies. Later, this is what he told reporters.
But when you look at their faces, you realize that they're dealing with kids. You have heard the story that they are young, but when you see them, you realize that is a disaster.
It's not clear at this stage what is the exact cause of death. There's autopsies being carried out and toxicology reports will be expected as well to tell a better picture. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has sent his condolences, and a statement from his office also said, while the president awaits more information on the incident, his thoughts are with the families who have lost children as well as families who are awaiting confirmation of how their children may have been affected. An entire nation stunned tonight trying to figure out how to avoid a similar tragedy and how this could have been avoided to start with. Pam?
So awful. Larry, thank you. And still ahead on this Sunday, a terrifying and deadly scene in Colombia. A stadium full of people crumbles and collapses during a bullfight. More shocking video and what we're learning about the aftermath next.
Going green in association with Kirloskar. Limitless.
Every week, we consume over 5 grams of plastic. I've just found a mere way to try and remove these from the environment and try and remove them from the environment such that we have less of them entering our food system and entering the environment in the first place. My name is Fionn Ferreira. I am 21 years old and I am a student of chemistry at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. Now, more than ever, young people are in a place of power. We're seeing more and more young scientists getting taken seriously, their grassroots idea being scaled. And we're also seeing just more and more young people who are passionate about this problem. We, however, have to remember that while only 25% of the global population is youth, they are 100% of the global future.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Today on CNN.
Heard it all before? But have you heard it like this?
The ultimate disruptor looks set to shake up our world. We really can't ignore the impact that this has. What can we do that explores a fresh angle? So let's untangle the players and political forces. The truth is a lot more complex. What's really going on?
Fast-paced news, in-depth reports, and fact checks from the perspective of The Global Brief with Bianca Nobilo. Tonight on CNN.
My name is Stephen Jameson, Global Head of Circular Economy Solutions at SAP.
The aim of a circular economy is to eliminate waste, circulate materials, keep products in use as long as possible, and regenerate natural systems. We're talking about a fundamental reworking of how we deliver the economy. At the moment, we're based upon an extractive system which depends upon nature, but is ultimately extractive. That will only go one way in the long term. A regenerative economy ultimately creates abundance of opportunity, abundance of materials, abundance of resources that enable us to thrive as a species and thrive as a piece of nature and as a part of nature.
At least 4 people are dead and dozens more are seriously injured today after part of a crowded stadium collapsed during a bullfight in Colombia. Now, this aerial view right here of the collapse shows how packed that stadium was when it fell. And you can see right here, people literally running for their lives. No official word yet on what caused that part of the building to crumble. And turning now to the growing anger in the aftermath of the Uvalde school massacre. The school district put Pete Arredondo, that embattled school police chief, on administrative leave last week after public safety officials testified he entered the school just minutes after the gunman, but that more than an hour passed before officers stormed the classroom. The attack left 21 people dead, including 19 children.
3 minutes after the subject entered the West Building, there was a sufficient number of armed officers wearing body armor to isolate, distract, and neutralize the subject. The only thing stopping a hallway of dedicated officers from entering room 111 and 112 was the on-scene commander, who decided to place the lives of officers before the lives of children.
Joining me now is Texas defense attorney Brian Weiss. Brian, good to see you again. So you believe these officers could be facing potential criminal exposure. Tell us why.
Well, Pamela, you need to understand that we are minutes into the first period of an investigation that encompasses literally mountains of evidence, videos, crime scene photos, and most important of all, establishing a timeline. But in light of the sound that you just played from Commander Steve McCraw of the DPS, our state police, if I'm a prosecutor, I'm looking at the felony of endangering or abandoning a child under 15, which makes it a felony if you knowingly, intentionally, recklessly, or with criminal negligence put a child in a position where they're subject to imminent bodily injury or death. And given what we know now, and we seem to know more with every passing day, it seems to me that in addition to the potential offense of tampering with the government document, if, for instance, the comment that Pete Arredondo made to the media about trying a number of keys before the janitor finally got there, it's not a crime to lie to the media, but if you put that in an offense report, then that's a separate offense. Pamela?
And as we heard, Arredondo, I mean, he spoke to a local paper in Texas. He's been largely quiet, but he did do this interview through his attorney. It was a written interview, and he said he didn't know he was the on-site commander. You know, there was clearly mass confusion. Could any of that be a defense?
Not really. First of all, any of your viewers who have binge-watched Law & Order know that any statement a defendant makes in or out of court that is ultimately proven to be false can be admitted at his trial, if there's a trial, not only to impeach his credibility, but to show what prosecutors love to call consciousness of guilt. And the fact that he doesn't believe he was the on-scene commander, with all due respect to the chief, that's why the good Lord built the courthouse, so we can sort out questions of fact exactly like that.
I want to talk about the DA, Christina Mitchell Busby. We haven't heard from this woman, and she is really in the eye of the storm, right? What can you tell us about her background, her experience, and why she's been so radio silent over the last month, much to the chagrin of reporters covering this story and families?
Well, Pamela, to paraphrase William Shakespeare, yeah, some folks are born famous, some achieve fame, and some have fame thrust upon them. A lot of folks don't know who this woman is, but she's about to become one of the most famous DAs in Texas. And she's earned her turn in the spotlight. 24 years as a lawyer, 8.5 years as a prosecutor in Uvalde, specializing in border prosecutions, 18 months as the elected criminal district attorney, spent time as a defense attorney doing trial and appellate, and she's board certified in criminal law, an honor that less than 1% of all Texas lawyers ultimately obtain. And while I know that there is some concern that, as you said, she's been radio silent, What I've learned the hard way as a special prosecutor, and what I know Ms. Busby recognizes, is that before the facts are in, you as a prosecutor have to recognize that sometimes silence is golden. And she doesn't answer to me or to you or to anybody else except the citizens in Uvalde County who elected her and the loved ones of those 21 people who met such a terrible, terrible end last month. Pamela?
I'm going to ask you about this Texas State Senator Roland Gutierrez. He was suing the Department of Public Safety, claiming that it is withholding documents related to the shooting. Do you expect to see anything come from that, given the fact there is this ongoing investigation, as you pointed out?
And that's a great question, because while the Texas Public Information Act is premised on the notion that sunlight is the best disinfectant, there are exceptions, one of which, as you just pointed out, is an ongoing criminal investigation. That exception, however, doesn't apply to members of the legislature, such as Senator Gutierrez, provided he signs an agreement that he will keep that information from the public and confidential. And if for some reason DPS says, no, we're not going to give it to you, he doesn't have to get an opinion from the Attorney General like most of us do. He can go right to court, sue, and get attorney's fees. My money is on the senator.
All right, Brian Weiss, thank you so much. Well, you are in the CNN newsroom. Coming up, I'm going to talk live to January 6th Select Committee member Jamie Raskin as the committee builds its case with testimony from Trump allies. Plus, Ohio Republican Congressman Warren Davidson joins me to discuss the Supreme Court's reversal of Roe v. Wade and the bipartisan gun safety bill that is now in effect. But first, black women could be hit hardest by the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. I'll discuss the impact and what can be done about it with Kanika Harris from the Black Women's Health Imperative. Up next.
I'm Polo Sandoval in Bogota, Colombia, and this is CNN.
If the Rolex Submariner looks familiar to you, that's because it is almost without question the most imitated watch design in the world. It was first released in 1954 at the Basel World Watch Fair, and this was very much a dive watch. Of course, it's become a luxury staple over time. We have a rotating external bezel, we have a dark dial, we have luminous indices. All of these things made it attractive for divers like Jacques Cousteau, who wore the watch in his film The Silent World. Of course, this utilitarian dive tool graduated to a style icon when Sean Connery wore it in Dr. No, a James Bond film from 1962. It is the greatest value-retaining watch on the market, meaning that in every year since its release, it has inflated in price and in value.
My school has been involved in human trafficking awareness and taking action against human trafficking for about 13 years. My name is Veronica McDaniel, and I am teacher supervisor of Atlanta International School Against Human Trafficking. I feel it's important to teach young people to know the signs of human trafficking. We can do a lot of prevention work just by opening their eyes to the problem. Hashtag My Freedom Day means a lot to me. It actually fuels my work with young people at Atlanta International School and globally. 6 years running, we've been able to really reach a lot of students. It's just become bigger than I think any of us really thought it would, and now we want it to keep getting even bigger. My hope for the future is that students are becoming so much more confident in this topic that they're completely leading the charge, where students are listening to other students, and we're realizing that's the most effective way for kids to really hear about the issue. I'm an idealist. I know that we can't completely eradicate human trafficking in the next 5 years, but my hope is that over time, with this new wave of strong young leaders, that we're certainly diminishing.
These troops, they are Russian. I've spoken to the commander. He said they are now in control. Over that way. It's a secret location. They're going to fire on Russian forces. There has been a ferocious battle here. There's unexploded grenades everywhere. We're being shown the powerful American guns, giving them an edge.
You downplayed the US intelligence assessments. Do you now regret that?
I'm in Kiev right now, and it is under attack, Mr. Lavrov, from Russian forces. I'm being told by our security that we need to get our flak jackets on. No matter where you are in this country, lives are being shattered. There are thousands streaming out. It is at least a chance to save their own lives. Matthew Chance, CNN.
Well, the Supreme Court ruling striking down Roe v. Wade could impact women of color more severely than anyone else. A Duke University study estimates that a complete abortion ban could increase black maternal deaths by 33%. Black women are already 3 to 4 times more likely to die giving birth compared to white women. I want to bring in Kanika Harris from the Black Women's Health Imperative. Kanika, those are some damning stats, and this is personal from you. Talk to us about your own experience as a black woman having an abortion and what impact this ruling will have on women of color.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I never thought in my 40s that I would be in a situation where I would have to contemplate an abortion. I was married, I had children, you know, substantially employed, and didn't know that I would end up in that situation. However, due to my previous pregnancies, due to experiencing trauma and racism during pregnancy and delivery, it was recommended that if I were to get pregnant again, that my uterine walls had stretched so thin from my pregnancies, having 2 twin pregnancies, that it wasn't a good idea for me to move forward with the pregnancy. And despite our best efforts, my husband and I, we found ourselves pregnant when I had 1.5-year-old twins, and we had to make the very difficult decision to pursue that pregnancy or terminate that pregnancy. You know, living in DC, recognizing that black people in DC represent 50% of the population in DC, but 90% of the maternal deaths in DC. So
why do you think that is?
It's a lot of reasons. One, it's racism and racist care, both disrespectful care in hospitals. I've gone to 2 different hospitals in DC to deliver and have received disrespectful care where I wasn't listened to. And additionally, it's racism over our life course. You know, from the time we're born to the time we reach reproductive age. There's 20 years of research to show that the stress that we endure because of racist policies, because of trying to overcome and circumvent the system to get terminal degrees to succeed, that weathers our reproductive organs and can put us in higher risk when we're pregnant.
Your organization's website says your mission is to lead the effort to solve the most pressing health issues that affect black women and girls in the U.S. So how does the SCOTUS ruling impact that mission?
So it just energizes us in our mission. We started in reproductive health 40 years ago. So we will just continue the fight. We will, you know, develop allies and work with our allies, our reproductive other organizations that we work with, to continue to fight to make sure that abortion access, it's accessible, it's safe, and that we work on the front end in terms of contraception as well.
I want to get to another question about what we heard from Asa Hutchinson, the governor of Arkansas, and AOC today. So Governor Hutchinson essentially said he is comfortable with the government forcing a woman to carry out a pregnancy. Here is how Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez reacted to that this morning.
The state of Arkansas and Governor Hutchinson governs over a state that has the 3rd highest maternal mortality in the United States. 71% of the women who die are black women as well. This is a state that has 26% child poverty, where 1 in 4 children are living in in poverty in the state of Arkansas, and forcing women to carry pregnancies against their will kill them.
I want to get your reaction to what we heard her say, and also the fact that many of these states that have abortion bans have exceptions for the mother. If the mother's life is at risk, there is an exception for her to get an abortion. I want to get your take on that as well.
Yeah, it angers me. It's personal because I had to make the gamble of whether I would be here for my own children. You know, as someone who financially supports my family, would I carry out a pregnancy and die and not be here for the children that are here, that I have, and not be here for my husband and my family? So those are decisions that are at play when you say that a woman has to carry out a pregnancy that could be extremely high risk that she could die from.
But do you accept the exceptions? Do you trust those exceptions, essentially, for women, for the mothers who could have their lives at risk? They have an exception to get an abortion in some of these states.
If we trust those women and trust Black women to know what those health risks are, to know that they are at health risk as well, and those medical providers also believe them, then that would be at that. But no, right now I don't trust them to make a decision for us to carry out a pregnancy and trust that medical risk.
All right, thank you so much, Kanika Harris. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, now that federal abortion protections are over, some Republicans are raising the idea of a national abortion ban. I'm going to get Ohio Republican Congressman Warren Davidson's thoughts on that and a lot more coming up on the show. Stay with us.
Everything is concentrated on the razor's edge, and you forget the score, you forget where you are. I feel that my body's floating within myself.
Arthur Ashe, bright young member of the United States Davis Cup team.
Some people think we are all brawn and no brains, and I like to fight the myth.
He started becoming a citizen of the world.
Arthur Ashe, the first black player to win the men's Wimbledon singles title.
He had evolved from someone who was analytical to someone who became more about direct action.
AIDS became another fight for Arthur, and he picked it up like he did every other cause.
He never forgot about his race, and when I say his race, I'm talking about the human race.
Citizen Ashe premieres tonight at 9 on CNN.